lesson 5, because yeah, I kind of have a lot. Today, second part of irrigation, mostly talking about rebates, talking a little bit about how to change the irrigation as the garden matures, and we'll talk some about smart controllers, determining the amount. We already did that third point actually, really in homework. It's mostly a homework thing. And then Martha Rodriguez with LADWP will be here to talk about what's it called? About the rebates through LADWP at the end. So any rebate questions we'll kind of save for her. Okay, so changing the irrigation as the garden matures, we're talking about like kind of year to year, how does it look different? And just reminding us, last week we talked about how essentially the goal is to train the roots to go deep into the soil and extensively in the soil where the water is and where it's more moist, and then training them over time by doing deep waterings and tapering off, so that they can in the future be established and withstand kind of longer stretches of time with longer stretches of dry periods, I guess I should say. So that's kind of the goal. So this should be kind of review, but essentially that first year, the plants are small. I mean, well, they're usually coming in a pot, so they're constrained to whatever that pot size is. And the roots are just that size. So that means they don't have a big extensive root system. So over the next few months, we really want to be encouraging those new roots to grow into the surrounding soil. And we do that via irrigation. And we do that by watering well and evenly all over the plant so that it actually starts to do that. And this first year will definitely be like the more frequent waterings that you will do in the life of the plant. That first winter, you definitely want to, they're going to need regular soil moisture. So you want to encourage a healthy root system. And again, mimic a good rainy season. So like a nice wet winter, at which, you know, our average is 15. So maybe 15 plus inches in that first winter, making sure they get that. And really this first year is all about being vigilant and monitoring those young plants because they are more sensitive because of their smaller root systems. And they're more sensitive to like high temperatures, wind events like Santa Ana's, any kind of, you know, the lack of rainfall, and, you know, the amount of rain they're going to be sensitive to. So we have to apply the appropriate supplemental water ahead of their needs to avoid stressing them out. So this first year is like the most frequent kind of waterings you'll do, and clearly a lot more monitoring. And then I put this thing down here of, I know I kind of said irrigators talk in inches, but I think just for some of us that it's harder to imagine inches per hour or inches of rain and watering. You kind of think about it as like that first initial install day you're using for a 1 gallon plant, like about 10 gallons per plant. And that's what you're using when you install. And remember, we talked about you want to water the hole before you install, water the hole really well so it gets that moisture in the surrounding soil, and then let it drain, then plant the plant, and then water it really well. That first watering is so critical and really important to water it kind of more than you think, you know. It's hard to overwater on the very first time, you know. And then you want to consider watering about 3 to 5 gallons they say 3 to 5 gallons per gallon of pot, right? So if you have a 1 gallon pot, you know, you're watering about 3 to 5 gallons per thing. So I think that helps for those of us who kind of see a gallon and can think about it, you know, like one of those 5 gallon buckets. Obviously not all at once. You want to make sure it's actually penetrating. If it's a bigger gallon with a bigger root ball, you got to, you know, multiply that by 3 or 5 for the, you know, for a 5 gallon bucket or something. Oh, wait, I didn't do this in presentation form. I guess I should do that so it's a little bit bigger and you guys don't have to see my tabs. Oops. Okay, so no wonder it has felt so easy. Okay, so second year, this is where you know, it's still considered an establishing year. It's not an established plant yet, but this is when you start to taper off, especially if you had normal average rainfall. You start to reduce the irrigation frequency, not the depth. We still want to get a nice deep watering, but you want to start to reduce the frequency, especially in that second summer. And this is that process of training the roots and tapering off the water. frequency. So again, trying to get that 1.5 to 2 inches of precipitation, which usually wets about the top 18 inches in one irrigation event. That's pretty I mean, that pretty much reaches 1.5 to 2 inches of irrigation usually wets the top 18 inches in most soils. Then year 2, yeah, you're still want to water slowly, make sure that you're actually getting good infiltration with the soil, still be mindful about watering and monitoring the plants. And also this thing of, which is the same with the first year, but make sure you're getting that good all over watering, not just like right where the plant is. You want to make sure you're getting watering all around the plant and all the soil, so that we're still encouraging the roots to move outward. The second year is kind of a good time to find like an indicator plant that is kind of like your canary in the coal mine. It's like the plant that kind of wilts first to let you know maybe the rest of the garden's in need of water. So something like a more fleshy perennial, like a Irrigation glauca, the seaside daisy, that can be a good indicator plant because it's more sensitive. So essentially when it starts to dry up or wilt, you can be like, okay, maybe the rest of the garden needs water. So finding one of those plants is a helpful thing for kind of honing your more, your like kind of, what's it called? Your more tactile skills, as opposed to like, you know, depending on technology and whatnot. Just make sure your indicator plant isn't something that goes summer dormant, like a bulb or like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a Encelia californica. They go summer dormant, so no amount of water is going to make them more green. So they're not really in the summer, at least. Year 2, you still, if you have a low rainfall year or you're experiencing a drought, you definitely want to make sure you're adjusting the water schedule to still match those kind of averages that they would be used to, because we're still in those establishing years. So we still kind of want to mimic the rainfall somewhat, especially in the winter, and just slowly taper off. Oops.
I have a question real quick.
Go for it.
What was that native plant you just mentioned that would kind of like not
indicator
in the summer?
Oh, not be great in the summer?
Yeah.
Oh, I was saying any bulbs, like a lot, like Calcortis, those kind of ones, but I mentioned Encelia californica. That one can go summer deciduous. Not always if you water it. It's just not a good indicator plant, you know, because it's not reliably staying green all year long, if that makes sense.
Cool, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, year 3, we're starting to get into like more established. So we want to continue with the infrequent but deep waterings. And I would really encourage you to do a deep watering while you're actually servicing the garden, just to make sure that you know, it's still actually doing what you want it to. And at this point, you can really start to do the kind of quick spritz, or I think I referred to it as like refreshing sprinkles, which is, you know, not an effective watering of the garden. It's really just like kind of cooling things off, maybe cleaning off the leaves. You can start to do this in year 3 in those dry down periods. I mean, you could do it earlier too, but I think because you'll be doing more frequent waterings in year 1 and maybe a little into year 2, you won't really need the refreshing sprinkles as much. But as it gets older, you can start to like incorporate that in. They're not necessary, but in the urban environment, like keeping those leaves nice and clean, because they tend to get more dust and kind of pollutants and things on them, so that they can still, and obviously if it's an aesthetic garden for someone's yard, there's also that element of keeping it like clean and fresh, and it cools down the soil a little bit and the plant usually. Okay, and then year 4, irrigation. Okay, so irrigation, we kind of consider this more like the established period. So still doing the infrequent deep waterings, like it should be at the most infrequent, and still like the 1.5 to 2 inches, depending on your soil. And really just kind of, we're at a place of, as the garden gets older, just making sure and monitoring that the garden still is watering everything appropriately. So any repairs, that's kind of standard with irrigation, any leaks, stuff like that. Maybe adjusting the schedule as, you know, it becomes more mature, you can do the less frequent waterings, or just adjusting the schedule based off of the season. You'll still be doing that. That's a regular part of the routine. And then it also might include like moving the emitters out wider as the plant grows in size, or like, you know, increases in diameter, or adding more emitters, so irrigation becomes kind of just like a monitor maintenance thing, and making sure that you're still watering it the way you want to. Even something like with pop-ups, making sure that maybe a plant that's gotten bigger is not blocking the pop-up, so that you're unintentionally maybe creating a dry spot. Just making sure your irrigation system is actually wetting everything like you want it to is kind of what you're doing in the later years of a garden. Or potentially, I guess, yes, also mineral residue buildup. You can, clean the filters of your irrigation, or drip, it tends to accumulate quite a bit of mineral stuff. So you might be replacing stuff, or soaking stuff in vinegar, that sort of thing. And then lastly, remember that if you add plants to a mature garden, so we're talking, this is our mature garden, they will need to be on that different watering schedule. Again, the more frequent waterings, and that's probably going to be hand watered. They're going to be hand watered until they can be established, and then be on the schedule with all of the other mature plants in the garden. So let's see, smart controllers. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about smart controllers. Honestly, this is like, I don't have a lot of experience with smart controllers. I've used mostly those kind of automated timer ones, not really these new ones. So I can't speak from a lot of experience, but I get the gist. I can share with you what I'm supposed to, which is, first, let's starting off with this interesting and horrifying factoid, which is water use. Residential outdoor water use in the US accounts for more than 9 billion gallons of water every day. And that's mainly for landscape irrigation, which is insane. That's every day. And experts say that as much as 50% of this water is wasted. So 4.5 billion gallons is wasted due to either overwatering, or overwatering that's either caused by like inefficiencies in the way you irrigate or in the irrigation system itself. So that really sucks. But also there's obviously all the best practices that we've talked about can address these inefficiencies, in addition to using technology like smart controllers, because the whole goal is to basically apply water only when the plant needs it. So that's so basically these smart controllers pull in actual weather data, like current weather data for your area, and adjust the watering time or watering schedules from that actual data. So they can be very helpful, clearly. And the thing is with those kind of old timer controllers that used to be considered smart controllers that were really just kind of automated, those kind of err on the side of overwatering. And that's because really our landscape was dominated by lawns, and kind of still is. But, so lawns typically need consistent, frequent moisture. So that's kind of what our controllers, our old ones, used to emulate, or used to function for. It's a lot harder to overwater a lawn. So that's why you kind of see that. And these newer systems are allowing for more ability to program and have longer intervals in between and things like that. So that is helpful. And also, a lot of the rebates we're going to discuss, or Martha's going to discuss, changing out like your sprinkler head, your high volume spray nozzle for like a rotator head is going to be more water efficient. So there's a lot of different things, not just smart controllers, but I believe we have to mention them because there's a rebate for them. Anyway, the benefits are, clearly it might save water, just explain some of those reasons. If it's only watering when you need it, it's not watering when it's actively raining. So that's obviously important, because if it's just, raining, the water is just going to run off and it's not actually going to be absorbed by the plants. So it is kind of a waste if we're watering when it's a good rainy season or when it's raining well. And then also some of you can program with the local watering restrictions. So, for example, LADWP, you can't water 9 to 4. So you can actually program that in so that it avoids that time frame. Obviously, too, remote access to it is a great boon. That's why we all love cell phones, so I think that's obvious why it's just more convenient and easy to use. You can change the watering schedule from your phone, as opposed to having to go to the site to actually adjust the controller to change the schedule for whatever reason. And also that could be like if you have a Santa Ana wind event happening, that's coming in a few days, then you can actually program all the gardens that you service to give an extra, watering so that they can kind of handle that. So definitely positives. A lot of different cities. Oh, well, I guess this is a benefit, which is that, you know, as they're just going to become more popular as more smart home devices become popular, you know, I think people just are going to want more of that. So I don't know if that's really a benefit, but anyway, that's just a factoid, I guess. Many cities and states already require them, so it's definitely a benefit to already have one or get one to comply with those requirements. And then whether or not someone like me, who's sort of a Luddite, cared whether or not anyway, whether or not I'm up to date with them, this is the future. Like, more wireless and smart things are happening. Wireless flow meters are coming, which would be able to monitor how much water is coming into your house. So this is kind of the future anyway. And I think all these things will have to work together at some point. So some of the drawbacks would be, your homeowner or your crew, your own crew, might not be adept at smartphone apps. So you would have to be kind of in charge of that whole system if they don't know how to use it. And, you know, that's just kind of more of an inconvenience if you have to communicate with them about every little thing and they don't know how to use it at all. Also, you know, maybe in the case of I could see someone being like, oh, I'm having a party and I don't want the irrigation system to go off. Can you turn it off? And so just the little inconveniences maybe of someone else not knowing how to use it kind of falls onto the responsibility will fall onto someone, probably you. Also, timers and controllers can be kind of complex, and they're very site specific, individually designed, and they have quite a bit of upfront programming. So that can be a downside, especially I think in a smaller garden. It might not be worth all of the kind of programming and stuff and complication for something so small. But in a very large landscape that has lots of different hydro zones and stuff, I think this could be helpful. A smart controller could be helpful for kind of organizing all of the different hydro zones and schedules. Clearly there might be limitations. There's always kind of limitations to technology, and there might be a situation where you just can't program it to your needs. So be sure to investigate whatever smart controller you're looking into to make sure that it actually can work with what you're intending to set it up for. One of those limitations might be just access to internet. Many of these need that, or some kind of wireless deal. So if you don't have access in parts of your yard or where your irrigation controller box is, you don't get it, that might be a downside. So sorry, I'm moving kind of quickly, guys, but I just want to make sure that I leave enough space and time for Martha. So irrigation problems, there's really just kind of two. It's really just overwatering or underwatering. And essentially, sorry, I'm moving some things around so I can actually see. Overwatering is, I think, more of a newbie mistake, especially a really eager newbie that's got their first kind of native garden. You can get a little overeager and overwater. And yeah, it's definitely something I see with first-time gardeners, I guess. And really, some of the evidence you would see actually looks somewhat like underwatering, but the soil's moist. That's the main difference. So always check for soil moisture. And one of the symptoms might be wilting, which is sometimes counterintuitive for folks, but basically, you might see wilting happening, but there's still soil moisture, and that would be maybe an indicator that overwatering is happening. So definitely don't just water because you see wilting. Like we talked about in the last lecture, that sometimes wilting is just a natural response to heat, and it might return, if it returns to normal once the day kind of cools down by the evening, then there's no need to water. That's just a natural response, and it's just kind of a stress response that's normal. So always be sure you're actually checking the soil moisture. Is there something else I was going to say about that? Anyway, so some of another one would be maybe sometimes like brown or yellowing leaves, which can be like a symptom of a lot of things. So it's almost not very helpful. But again, if you see a lot of moisture and you're seeing the yellow and brown leaves, I would start to kind of suspect that. Some evidence of overwatering that you can't really do much about, but at least I guess in the future you could change, would be if you have root rot, which is if you get a dead plant, you have a dead plant, you're like, oh, what happened? And you go to like grab it. And if you could just pull it out, easily, and it just comes out really with no, what's it called? Like, what's that called? God, I can't think of it. Anyway, with no struggle, then, and also when you pull it out, you see moisture at the tip of the base of the plant, and you see very little roots, like there's no roots connected. It's just kind of like a stick. That is usually root rot. And so you'll see the stick and a wetness and like no roots connected. That's because you were overwatering and the roots all rotted. You can kind of think about, really with overwatering, you're almost like you're creating the conditions where you're just kind of rotting the plant to death. Like you're waterlogging the soil so much that bacteria and stuff actually just breaks it down and kind of rots it away. So that can be root rot or crown rot. And then lastly, anaerobic smells. You know, anything that smells like death usually is. I can't think of a situation where bad smells would ever be a good sign. Bad smells are usually a sign of stuff decomposing. So we don't want to smell decomposition processes happening when we're trying to keep like live living plants in the ground. So underwatering would be the the other counterpart to watering problems. And just as a clarification, we want to make sure we distinguish between drought and summer. Obviously, our summer, so we've talked about this, the wet winters, dry summers. Drought is when you have this prolonged period of lack of rainfall or very, very low rainfall, which would be breaking from our usual pattern. Sadly, I think with climate change, like we're starting to not have that regular pattern, but low to no summer rainfall would be a consistent pattern. So not having rain in the summer is normal, and the plants are not suffering from it. You know, this having less than an inch from May to November, this is what they're adapted to, and this is normal. Even if they start to get a little crispy by the end of summer, early fall, this is like part of the process. It's really with the rainfall, which we usually expect in winter. So if we do have a drought, this is going to stress the plants because they can't resist a lack of rainfall forever. You know, a lot of our native plants are drought tolerant. They're not like drought proof completely, right? So some of the symptoms for underwatering, like I said, kind of look like overwatering, but in the underwatering case, clearly the soil below will be dry. So if you dig down or even at the soil surface, you'll notice that it's very dry. That would be a big sign. And then a lot of times it's stuff like this, the leaves just kind of lose their like healthy luster, you know, they just don't have that kind of like verdant green, or also sometimes the leaves actually just change to more of a smaller shape than normal. They wilting again can be one, but in this case it would not return to normal by evening. It would just be kind of wilting and the presence of dry soil. Sometimes you might see like branch dieback, or like the lack of flowers completely. Maybe it's not flowering. That can be a sign of underwatering. Also just like this failure to thrive. Sometimes I've seen plants where it almost looks identical a year later than to when I planted it, you know, and I'm not talking about the like the creep, what is it? The creep, I can't even remember now, creep leaf or sleep creep leaf. It's not like, it really looks identical, you know, no new growth, no like kind of healthy green color to it. That can be, this failure to thrive can be a sign of underwatering. And I would say underwatering in general is much more of a risk for new plants, and the older plants, if you've watered them, you know, if they are established, truly established, they will have more extensive root systems. So they're less likely to be at risk for underwatering. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about.
Hey, Claire, it's Arthur.
Yeah.
Got a quick question. So I've heard that you shouldn't water on a hot day because of fungus in the soil. Can you talk about that? What is that?
We'll talk more about it in the pest management class, but essentially, again, with our climate, we're used to dry summers. So any kind of warm or water in the peak of the day is like going to be water in warmer soil because it's the hottest time of the day. And so that kind of creates conditions for certain fungus and bacteria to thrive, especially and usually ones that we don't want with our plants, because essentially you're kind of disrupting the natural way of the soil ecology. And so you're giving water to a situation, and it, like, you know, might cause a population boom in some pathogenic fungal, you know, entity. But and so that's why you wouldn't want to do it in the heat of the day. Also, it's not going to infiltrate as well. Like, you know, plants can't really, like, they're evapotranspirating at that point. They're usually, there's a lot of other like plant stuff where essentially like the plant is respiring and not necessarily like uptaking water. They typically do that the coolest part of the day. Not all plants, but typically they do. So there's a couple different reasons not to, and they typically say like just wait until the evening to water. But in terms of fungal, it's usually because essentially it's like warmest part of the day, and like a petri dish, you want it warm,
Right.
and a little bacteria, and it grows. So we don't want to create those conditions when for our plants. And usually in the cooler part of the day, the soil temperature is down, and like hopefully your soil ecology kind of manages and keeps those fungal critters in check. If that makes sense.
Makes sense. Got it.
Great.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay, so talking about state of California water use regulations. So I'm sure all of you know, California has a bunch of different regulations that are aimed at reducing water use. And there's not just regulations though, they also have a lot of different resources for helping with that aim, helping with reducing potable water use. We're going to talk about the following. So there's WUCLs, which is basically like a database, a plant database regarding the plant's water needs. And then there's CIMES, which is like it's basically weather data in general. And then WELO and MAWA we will talk about. These are all acronyms. These aren't actually words. WELO as ordinance, and MAWA is basically like a formula for creating kind of a water budget. So we're going to go into those. But I should say here on the left is an image of a CIMES produced map, which is essentially the evapotranspiration zones for the state. Evapotranspiration, we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk a lot about, I guess, but essentially think of it as like kind of a compound word, evapo for evaporation and transpiration for, transpiration for transpiration. So evaporation is the loss of moisture through the soil. So water lost through the soil, and transpiration is the water lost through the leaf of the plant. So those two things combined together is the evapotranspiration. That's all the water that's being lost for a plant. And really what they do is they calculate these, well, let me step back a bit. Evapotranspiration is also measured in inches. So it's the inches lost of water, which makes sense because we talk about irrigation with inches, right? The precipitation with the homework. So how many inches are you putting down? How much rain is falling? So the evapotranspiration really is kind of like the irrigation demand for a plant. And it's like what you need to replace in the soil for that plant to be able to uptake so it's not stressed out. And the way they calculate evapotranspiration is basically through this reference crop, which is just usually a high water needing like cool season turf grass or like alfalfa or something that they water really well, and they measure these evapotranspiration rates for it. And so you have the kind of high end evapotranspiration rate for this reference crop. And then you can, using WUCLs or any other thing, actually I think WUCLs is one of the only ones, but using WUCLs, you can actually kind of get like a plant coefficient and figure out what percentage of that reference crop or what percentage of these values does your plant need water for. Sorry, I think we'll clarify it. But essentially, just in a nutshell, ETO, evapotranspiration, also ETO, that's just like the shorthand math term for it. It's going to depend on where you're planting the plant. So where in the state are you? Are you in a desert? Because obviously it's going to evapotranspirate more in a hot ass place. Or are you up north? It's going to evapotranspire less. So it depends on where you are. The ETO depends on where you are, and it also depends on the plant. Are we talking about a cactus, or are we talking about like a fern? So ETO is relative to your plant and your place. So these maps we will get into, but that's what they're basically starting to provide. Here, so going to WUCLs, again, I said it's kind of a database for like over 3,000 plant species that are typically used in California landscapes. It's not just natives, it's natives and non-natives, it's landscape plants in general. So you can actually look up the plant you're using to find out its water needs. So this is just like, they also have some kind of care and maintenance on them, but it's mostly regarding its water needs. And basically what you do when you look up a plant, they have it divided into 4 different categories. And again, this is going to depend on what region you are in, but you'll identify what region you're in, and then you pick a plant, and it'll tell you if it's a high water need plant, moderate, low, or very low. And here's the abbreviations. And then you can see this percentage of ETO, which again, the higher the water needs, the higher the percentage of that reference crop of the ETO. If we were watering that cool season turf grass that I was talking about that they use as a reference crop, it would be 100%. It would be the exact same thing, where they measure it off of that plant and then we kind of use a percentage off of that for everything else. So if we were watering that one turf grass that that's used as a reference, then it would be fully the same. It would be 100%. But in this case, just any old random turf grass is, you know, somewhere in the high range, 70 to 90% of ETO, maybe 100 even in certain cases, but this is a range. Moderate, something like kangaroo paws or lantana would be like 40 to 60% the ETO. And then lavender or rosemary, we say it's about 10 to 30. And then Ceanothus, Arctocephalus, all these natives that we have here are considered very low. So they're only using 10% of the water of that reference crop, only using 10% of the ETO. I think, trying to think if there's, okay, computer, thank you. Okay, so CMEs, going back to kind of that map, which is, CMEs stands for California Irrigation Management Information System, which is just a total mouthful. It was basically developed in the 80s by the Department of Water Resources and UC California, and it was developed for assisting irrigators to manage their water resources more efficiently. And that's why we have all these ETO zones. So, oops. I don't know why my computer likes to play games with me. But yeah, so we can see here, here's all the different zones with same map. And here is the monthly average reference for the monthly average evapotranspiration for each zone. So there's 18 different zones and you can see they're color coded, and you just find out where your zone is and you can actually look up the monthly average for your zone. Also, CMEs manages like over almost 150 weather stations in California. So you can actually get your real live weather data for the closest weather station to you, as opposed to using just that average map. But they also have evapotranspiration graphs for every part of the state, you know, all their different weather stations. And we'll go into the weather station ones, but I want to just kind of show here. Here we've zoomed in on that same map, and here this is Los Angeles County. And you can see all the different colors refer to the different ETO zones. And in LA, you have one, this is a 2, this is the one, the numbers refer to the zones. So 1 is this purpley color, 4 is this purple blue. 2, you can't actually see the color because it's so small, but it's still in LA County. I swear it's there. So that's 1, 2, 3, a 4th zone here, a 5th zone, 6th, and 7th. So there's 7 different colors here, which means there's 7 different ETO zones in LA, which makes sense. LA is a huge county. There's a lot of different climates in here. So you have to pick the one for your zone to get your evapotranspiration zone, evapotranspiration rate for your zone. So let's just use Sun Valley, like where Theodore Payne is located, as an example. And it's basically somewhere in here. I remember actually doing the Google map for it, but just believe me. But it's somewhere in this beige zone, which corresponds to number 14. So we'll pull up that map. This is a zoomed in version, sorry, of the chart, which is again, that monthly average evapotranspiration for each zone. And if I go to that beige color, the 14, I think I have this, yes. You can see the monthly evapotranspiration for that zone. So this is just the average. This is not, you know, this is not what's actually the real live data. But you can see it should make sense if you look at January, it's got 1.55. So that's 1.55 inches lost in January, which isn't that much. And that kind of makes sense because January, we typically get some rain. It's much cooler. That should make sense with the lower evapotranspiration. And if you go all the way to July, you see it kind of peaks. And we're losing about 8.6, 8.7 inches in July. So you have to replace that per month for if you're watering that reference crop, and you would just adjust it for whatever crop you're using. And then if you look all the way to the right, that's the total. And you can see if you added each monthly value up, that would equal 57 inches. So in a year, that region typically on average loses 57 inches of water via evaporation through the leaf and the soil of basically the turf, whatever grass, the reference crop. And so that's the monthly average. So you can use this number, but you can also use the CIMMY's weather station closest to you. So these also are in your, these websites are in your student handbook in the outline section. But essentially, if I use the same map, these numbers correspond to weather stations in Los Angeles. 216 is the one closest in Arleta. And if I go here to the weather station for, well, you actually go, this goes to the CIMMY's page, it's on the weather data page, and you actually look for that weather station. You can see there's numbers, the ID number was 216, based off of that map we were looking at that kind of corresponded closest to Sun Valley. And if I go to 216, I click on it, it says Arleta, Los Angeles Basin, blah, 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 makes sense. And then I would, here it says create a limited hourly report. But you go to this pull down, and I actually would want to do the monthly so I can kind of compare it to the monthly average one. And this is going to give us, so limited monthly report, it's in English units, and then I run report. And it'll show me the, I hope you guys can see this. Can you guys see that? I'll zoom in, I guess, a bit more. So you can see it provides the ETO for that weather station for the last 12 months. So starting in August 2020, because we're in August 2021. And then it has precipitation and it has a bunch of other things, but we're going to focus on the ETO. But clearly, this is a resource you could use for whatever site you are, just using the weather station. And you can see it provides the ETO for each month in the last 12 months, and then moving on to 2021. So again, if I add these up, which I could just add the total here and the total here, that would give me the annual, what's it called, evapotranspiration for that weather station. So when I do that, it comes out to, I believe, 61. It's 38 plus 22. It comes out to 61, I hope. And that's the amount lost. So 61 inches compared to that monthly average, which was like at 57, right? That's a substantial difference, you know, or I mean, it's only a couple inches, but it is something. So what we're seeing then, this 61 inches compared to the monthly average, we're seeing that it's losing water, more water this in the last 12 months than it does on average. I hope that makes sense. But essentially, was there something I was going to say about that in addition? You can use either of these, right? It's just if you just want to get an average, or do you want to get the actual data, you can find your what's it called, your evapotranspiration for a zone. So again, I just want to show you, remember, this is 57 inches. We just looked at the real one, the real data of the last 12 months, and it was 61. So it's higher. And actually what is like the scariest part is that every time I do this class, it actually has been higher each time. The first class, I think it was like 55, and the next one it was 59, and now it's 61. So climate change is real, baby. Okay, WELO. What's my time look like, guys? Oh, we're doing good, I think. Well, yes. Okay, so WELO is basically a water landscape ordinance, a statewide ordinance, and it's essentially aimed at increasing water efficiency standards for, well, it's trying to just improve landscape irrigation water savings. So it does that by increasing the efficiency standards for new and retrofitted landscapes, also by establishing wastewater prevention for existing landscapes. And then it uses this, it sets kind of like a maximum upper limit for water use by doing this MAWA, which is the maximum applied water allowance. And that's a formula that we'll get to. And overall, it's just trying to encourage local agencies to use kind of economic incentives that promote the efficient use of water, which makes sense. That's why we have LADWP, our local water agency, that's offering various rebates that pertain to irrigation. MAWA, just again, it's part of the WELO ordinance, but I wouldn't ignore it if you're just like, oh, I don't care about the ordinance or whatever, because there's an interesting formula that's really helpful for other things. But basically, it's the upper limit for water use, and again, reduces water to the lowest practical amount. And it's mainly for new constructions, it's required for new constructions and renovations that are professionally installed and are larger than 2,500 square feet. And like, something that needs like a landscape review or permit, that would be where you need to use a MAWA. I have a formula here. There it is. Okay, so I know math is not everybody's strong suit, but I just like sit with this one because I really like this formula. And I think it's really, or it's helpful and you can adjust it for other situations, which is, so MAWA is maximum allowed water allowance. They want it in gallons, and that makes sense because it's a water agency. So they don't really, they measure water by how much water they actually have in gallons and not really necessarily in terms of inches. So this is a kind of exception to that thing, because this isn't just irrigators, it's the water agency. So they want it in gallons. So you basically take this ETO, which we talked about how you find that rate. And again, it's the evapotranspiration rate for a specific geographic area for growing a cool season turf grass at optimal levels. So again, this is the reference. This is the reference ETO. You take that, you multiply it by 0.62, which is going to convert those inches, because evapotranspiration is in inches per year, to gallons. That's just a conversion rate, like constant. And then you multiply that by ETAF, which is the, they call it the adjustment factor, but you could also kind of consider it like the plant coefficient. So remember when we were using those percentages, the percentage of ETO and that Wuchel slide, a native plant would be using maybe a much lower percentage. So in the maximum allowed water allowance, they use this 0.55, so 55% of ETO for residential projects and 0.45 for non-residential. And they just have this standard for these. They don't ask you to do, figure out your plant palette and everything like that. They're just like, okay, is it residential or is it not residential? And these are the different ETAFs, but they can be lower or higher if you wanted to actually use this formula for other situations. And then lastly, you multiply it by your landscape area in square feet. So again, this is just a quick example, and I just used that 57 inches per year that I got for Sun Valley on the chart for the monthly average. And then let's just say it's a residential zone of 3,000 square feet. I just plug all those things in. I just did 57, 60.62, 0.55 because it's residential, 3,000, and then I got 58,000 gallons. And that would be calculating the MAWA, which is something that's required and something you could provide if someone needed that for their actual project. But also what I really like about this is, like I said, this just is giving you the annual, right? Because I said the yearly evapotranspiration. You could do this in smaller intervals, like the monthly, because you can find the monthly average, or you can even use your weather data, your weather station, and do it down for like the interval of just a day. And so you could find how many gallons do I need for just this peak, like, maybe the hottest day in August or something, and find the actual gallons necessary for that. And you could actually keep it in inches, so you didn't have to convert it to gallons. This, depending on how comfortable you are with math, this could be really helpful. I really like using this one, especially for people that are maybe irrigating from a rain tank or something. You can figure out how many gallons you actually have caught and have in your water tank, and see how far that will reach you, because the tank is measured in gallons essentially. And so, or you can also use it for kind of calculating runoff stuff for like a roof. If you're using the turf replacement program, and you maybe are utilizing the water from your roof and catching that in the soil, there's ways to calculate it essentially. So I really like this. Yes, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. I appreciate you guys saying yes. These zones are not the same as the Western Garden book. It's kind of annoying that there's a million different zones of different things. These are CMIS zones or CMIS zones. And I'm not sure what you mean by, is this the same scale CalScape uses, Milton? But either way, okay. So again, remember I got that 57 via this chart here. Okay, so I'm just
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Back on the thing you were talking about, the MAWA. When do they use that? Is that like when you're going through the city planning process for, let's say, a new development
Yeah,
or the permitting process for an existing retrofit?
from what I understand, and I have never had to actually provide a MAWA. I've used that formula for other situations. But from what I understand, any kind of professionally landscaped area where you requires a permit or some kind of like, design, like a review or anything like that, you would be required to provide the MAWA. But I can't tell you from experience, like exactly when they ask for it, because I don't have that myself. So, but yeah, it's supposedly for all professionally installed retrofits or, and they have to be over 2,500 square feet. So kind of on the larger side, you know what I mean? That's probably why if you, like myself, I typically deal with like, residential smaller gardens. I'm not really dealing with that as much.
I'm sure city planning is asking for it on the landscape
Yeah.
design.
And anyone, I know there's some LADWP reps in here, kind of, if they know the answer to that, you can maybe throw it in the chat or shout it out when we take the break. So lastly, I think these are kind of my last slides, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll have Martha chat with us about the rebates. But essentially, yes, so opportunities for kind of professional extras. All of these are regarding the rebate program. So if you have a lot of specific details about the rebates, just wait for Martha. But these are just kind of services you could potentially provide. And I just wanted to remind you guys that if you are providing these services for any clients regarding like any services that are affiliated with the rebates, make sure to save any receipts for them, because they usually need to submit that to get their rebate back. So we have, there's irrigation controller replacement. Oops. I believe the rebate for the irrigation controller is at $200. So yeah, I mean, again, there's all the selling points are there, and you could just simply basically offer this to somebody who's maybe thinking about converting to a smart controller, has an old controller, or it just makes sense for their situation, or they're just interested in having a more smart home device or whatever. And you would just charge for the equipment and the labor and potentially like, and the programming of it, setting it, programming it appropriately for their garden. And you could even like add like a, like a subscription service for kind of ongoing maintenance / ongoing seasonal adjustments. So yeah, I think this is definitely like kind of a little like thing you could do that would make a lot of sense. And again, they're going to be getting $200 back for the actual controller if they apply for the rebates. So yeah, it's like kind of subsidized work, I guess. Sprinkler rebate work. Martha will talk about this, but there is a rebate for converting your old high volume spray nozzles, sprinklers, this is sprinklers, to new rotator heads. Those are typically kind of a lower precipitation rate, and higher water efficiency. So they really want to encourage people to switch over to those. So there is a conversion. It's a minimum of 30 heads required to actually do it. So if you're only changing 10, you won't get the rebate. She's going to tell us how much per thing. And then again, be sure to have an invoice that includes the model numbers and the quantities for the qualifying products. In your guys's handbook, this lecture, the class number 5, has a ton of rebate kind of material. So it also includes a bunch of pages of different qualifying models for the rotator heads, if you're like, I really want to know, but I'm sure you can also look for them online. And and just as a reminder, this sprinkler rebate work, this is not, this conversion to rotator heads does not work with the turf replacement rebate program. So this is for folks that maybe want to keep their lawn and they just want to switch out their sprinklers to a more efficient one. But the only irrigation system you can have for the turf replacement program would be either drip or hand watering. So this doesn't, you can't get both of these rebates. You can't get the 30 heads change out and convert your lawn, just in case anyone's was thinking about that. Rain garden grading. I do this a lot. This is kind of like what I focused on, the garden grading. So essentially, this is when you're capturing rainfall or any artificial irrigation, whatever, water that's falling on the landscape, you're catching it in the soil or throughout the landscape by using either basins or swales or berms and vegetating it with native plants. So the idea is to capture water in the soil. And this is, again, like this is what the southwestern states are starting to move towards. Instead of trying to shed all of our water off of our landscape, we're trying to actually capture it in the soil. So they're actually paying for this to happen. And one of the requirements for the turf replacement rebate is that you have some kind of water capturing feature, which would be like the swales, the berms, basins, or a garden, or even a rain tank. But that's a feature that's required to get that turf replacement rebate. So rain garden grading is really helpful because it's a lot of digging essentially and shaping of the landscape. And if you can assure that like you can create a functioning and properly graded rain garden, that really helps clients to be like, oh great, I don't have to worry about this, and now I can get the turf replacement rebate program or rebate. So I've found this to be very fruitful, and I collaborate with with designers, like landscape designers, and just install the appropriate rain garden. And the one thing is that does require some specialized expertise. I actually have a certificate in this, like how you guys are getting a different certificate. So, but you do have a handout in this lecture that's called Constructing and Maintaining a Rain Basin. And it's like the basics. I helped design it, or I helped write the curriculum. So it's just kind of the basics for constructing a rain basin. And it does utilize a very similar formula to the MAWA one that we just showed, that is for kind of figuring out your catchment area and how much water is shedding off your roof or whatever hardscape, so that you know how to size your rain garden. So like, if you have too small of a rain garden, it's just going to flood over. So you want to make sure you're sizing it appropriately for how much water actually is falling on this landscape or being directed to this landscape, like maybe through your roof gutters or something. And then there's also kind of like a special placement needs that the lower in the basin, so you can see the water's in here. This one's not planted at the lower parts, but the lower parts need to be plants that are okay with occasional flooding. You can see if there were a plant here, it would be a couple inches underwater. So you want to make sure that you're planting ones that are okay with that. There is, I believe, I'm trying to remember where I saw this list. I think Theodore Payne has a list that talks about plants that are good for rain garden basins. I can't remember specifically right now. I don't know why I'm blanking. But anyway, you want to make sure that there are plants either like a little bit more moisture or can handle some flooding, or are okay with maybe the heavier soil. Not that necessarily you have that, but they might get some extra water. And then on the top of the basins, you can see where it's dry, even when it rains. This is like, just topographically, it's a bit higher, so it's draining. It has a better drainage, or the gravity will help it. So these plants on top, I would kind of choose more plants that want better drainage. Okay, went on a little long about that, but I like talking about rain gardens. So, and then lastly, actually, yeah, this is kind of asked about, but I can't really explain more than this, but the WELO and MAWA calculations for new constructions and renovations that are larger than 2,500 square feet, they require this. So you could potentially be offering this. I think this made sense for, I know last class we had a lot more landscape designers, and if you're already making the design, being able to also provide complete MAWA calculations, I think could be really helpful, especially if it's needed for the design. And also, once you have the MAWA calculations, especially if you have multiple like hydro zones in a design or in a garden, you could really kind of create more custom calculations for each hydro zone. And you could actually kind of create like some customized reports that actually say, okay, this area uses this much water in the hottest season, or, you could really design with that, some informative reports for a client if you utilize these calculations. And like I said, it doesn't have to just be MAWA. I think you can kind of alter that formula to also tell you how much to irrigate. So like I said, you're using instead of the kind of the adjustment factor that they have, the 0.55 or whatever, you could actually use like what we would call a plant coefficient, which is just the decimal place version of a percentage of the plant, right? So again, gosh, that was terribly phrased. Sorry, guys. But essentially going back to that first slide that had percentage of ETO, you could figure out how much water you need to water maybe your native plant garden by using the ETO and then multiplying by that plant coefficient. So for the native plants from that slide, it would be like 0.1 or 0.2. Typically, our native plants are in the kind of point. The coefficient would be 0.1 to 0.2, and then a higher needing plants would be 0.8 to like 0.7 to 0.9, or other said 70 to 90%. And that goes for like, like a vegetable garden. That would be considered a high needing or high water needing plant. Okay. Oops. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to share the homework and then we'll take a break. We're going to, the homework is basically pay attention to Martha because it's going to be figuring out what LEDWP rebates a particular client that you have or whatever situation you want to use as the example, figuring out what rebates they qualify for and could benefit from. So it kind of explain to me what's going on in the situation. They have how big of a lawn, and I think that they could benefit from the turf replacement program because they want to switch to low, drought tolerant plants, or maybe like they don't want to switch their lawn and they have 50 irrigation heads that they could potentially change out and it would save them this much money. So I want you to pay attention to Martha. Tell me what this made up or real client could potentially qualify for with all of the different rebates. And yeah, just explain it pretty well. Don't just be like, they qualify for this. I want like a little bit more of a story and explain to me why and what, the details from Martha's chat. So, okay, it's 6:13. Let's do 6:18. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be back here at 6:18. And Martha will talk with us about the rebates. Okay, so I'm just going to go back into the, Milton. You said CalScape uses the low, very low for the plant water requirements. I don't know the answer. I'm not sure if it's exact. I mean, I'm sure they're related, but I'm not sure if they specifically use CMEs to get their thing. I imagine they do, but I don't know for real, or like nobody's actually told me and confirmed me that, but I believe that they would have to be because I'm not sure though, because I could also see CalScape just using their experiential knowledge from all the different kind of practitioners to identify low, very low, but I would imagine that they're somehow related, but I don't know. Man, that's a good question. Sorry, I can't answer it. Does somebody have a, Mila, okay. WELO certification classes offered through California Landscape Contractors Association and Metropolitan Water District of SoCal. Highly encourage taking it if you're interested. Great, thank you, Ernesto, for sharing that. For MELO purposes, you have to use the plant factor water use classification for plants through WUCLs. Yes, so that's good to know. That would not be for the MAWA then, I suppose, since they use the residential or non-residential. But yes, they're essentially the adjustment factor is just a catch-all, and the plant factor would be the same. It's just you're being more specific to what plant palette you have. Okay, I'm going to take roll or ask some questions if I know some of you guys aren't there, but.
Claire, this is Martha. I just want to do a sound check really quick. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect. I don't.
Great.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Let's see, who do I have here? Oh, here you are. Okay, Devin's here. What about Gina Ross? Are you here? I'm gonna Let's see, anyone else? What about Jerry Combs? Are you here? I don't see Jerry Combs. I don't have Brenda, my right-hand woman. No, not here. Lysandra, are you here? See. Margaret, I see you're here. Oh, there you are. Yeah, okay. Vidi, are you here? Vidi, are you here? I know I got homework from her. Oh. Oh, okay, that's right. Okay, I had your last name. I had the wrong one. Okay, Vidi, your Frias. Or I'll just write that down so I see it on the. Great. So I don't have Lysandra, Kimball, Jerry Combs, or Gina Ross. If any of you guys are here, hear me. Shout it out. Okay, it's 6:18.
Hey, Claire,
So
it's Arthur Macias. I'm sure you got me already.
yeah, I got you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Martha Rodriguez is here with us from LADWP. She is going to talk to us about all the rebates, and she's such a great resource. I say this every time, but if you have any questions, like ask them now. I mean, she has her information here, but anything you want to know about rebates, she knows the answer to. So please ask her. Maybe at the end, we'll have time for questions. We have plenty of time for questions.
All right. All right, I hope you guys can hear me. My name is Martha Rodriguez from LADWP. I am a water conservation specialist. The rebates is definitely what I work on. So here is our contact information. We are currently telecommuting. So if you need to email us, that would be the best way of getting a hold of us or myself. But we're a small group. We're actually about 5 people. So anybody can help you out with any of your questions. Next slide. All right, for the purposes of the rebate, I want to clarify or define what is residential, what is commercial. So for residential, it is a single family dwelling or 1 to 4 multi-family dwelling units. So if you have a duplex, triplex, fourplex, those you would apply under residential rebates. Commercial rebates would be commercial, industrial, institutional, and 5 or more multi-family dwelling units. So next slide. These are the residential rebates that I'm going to talk about. Claire, did you get a newer presentation?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
Damn.
no problem. I'll talk about them, and though they're not listed on here,
Okay.
if you give me a second, let me pull up my presentation so I don't mess up.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
We could potentially, well, I wonder, we could potentially have you share your screen if you want.
If it works, that would be fine. I can
Michael,
do
do you know if you could like put Martha as a host so that she can share?
Yeah, I can make her co-host.
Okay, cool. Oh, I should stop my share.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Martha, you're co-host now, so you should be able to.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I will be able to move this forward. Okay, so there's the definition. Here is the rebates that I will be going through. Weather-based irrigation controller. soil moisture sensor. There's two newer rebates, which is the hose bib irrigation controller, the flow monitoring leak detection device, rotating nozzles, rain barrel or cistern, and the turf replacement program. So briefly, I'm going to go through these. These all have some type of qualifying list of models, like Claire mentioned. You need to make sure that before you purchase something or apply that it is on that list. So weather-based irrigation controller for a residential property, if it is less than an acre of landscape, the rebate could be up to $200. If the property has more than an acre of landscape property, it would be $35 per station. The soil moisture sensor, must include a sensor and calibrator and an irrigation controller. Same thing as the weather-based irrigation controller, up to 200 if less than an acre, 35 per station. I believe you can have, so if it's over an acre, you can have, I think it's 12 stations available for future expansion. So I think that's more for a commercial that you can probably take advantage of that. And so that's good information there for you. So these are our two newest rebates. The hose bib irrigation controller, it pretty much connects, it's a small device that connects directly from the faucet, between the faucet and the hose. The rebate is up to $35. This is some type of smart controller where you're able to access it from your phone. I've seen these connected to, I'm not sure what they're called, but they're this long thing that shoots water. You're connected to your hose. So it's some type of, I guess, irrigation. That is, like I mentioned, up to $35. The flow monitoring leak detection device just came up about two weeks ago. And there's two types of devices. There's a device that you can attach to your water meter. And then there's the device that can be connected to your customer's plumbing. Now, we do not rebate on the one that you put onto the water meter. At this time, it's not something that that we are rebating on. However, if you are outside of the city of LA or outside of LADWP, the other rebate might be an option for you. What is needed, and you need to have reliable Wi-Fi at the installation location, smartphone or tablet. Once again, the rebate will only be paid to devices that are installed on the customer property, not on our meter. And the rebate amount for that is up to $150. Rotating nozzles, like Claire mentioned, minimum of 30 nozzles to qualify for the rebate, and the rebate is up to $6 per nozzle. I'm assuming that you guys are all landscapers or contractors or designers and professional. So you might be able to buy these nozzles for less than $6. You probably can also or do create your own invoices. I would definitely recommend that you take advantage of the full rebate amount. If you indicate that you bought the nozzles for $2, you will get a rebate of $2. That's why it says up to $2, or your customer will get a rebate of up to $2. So you definitely want to make sure that your invoice states the correct amount to take advantage of the full rebate. For rain barrel or cistern, we have the rain barrels that are up to $50 per barrel, limit 2. And cisterns, they vary depending on the size, 300, 400, and 500, limit 1. One thing I do want to clarify is that you cannot obtain both rebates. You can either get rain barrel rebates or cistern. You cannot get both. I will go into detail on the turf replacement, but I do want to touch up on the commercial landscape rebates first. And they're very similar to the residential. Weather-based irrigation controller, soil moisture sensor, rotating nozzles, large rotary nozzle retrofit, in-stem flow regulator, and then the turf replacement program. So for commercial landscaping, like I said, the rebates are similar. They just, for the weather-based irrigation controller or central computer irrigation controller. So maybe you have a school as one of your customers, or a big property, maybe something, a golf course. central computer irrigation controller would most likely be what they would have as opposed to having weather-based irrigation controllers. The commercial is based on per station only, not per device. So if you have, I don't know, 30 stations, it would be 30 times 50 per station. For the soil moisture sensor, this rebate is the same, up to $50 per station, must include sensor, calibrator, and controller. Rotating nozzles, this is actually the same as residential, 30 nozzles minimum, up to $6 per nozzle. Large rotary nozzle retrofit. High efficiency nozzle retrofits for large rotary sprinklers replace standard plastic nozzles with durable metal nozzles. So up to $13 per head, 8 head minimum. These I've seen out in big fields. So I guess if they have old style nozzles and you just want to do a retrofit instead of, possibly, changing out the landscape, a retrofit would work. And these are $13 per head. Once again, make sure that the models that you're looking at qualify. In-stem flow regulators, they control the water in the irrigation system at the sprinkler head, up to $2 per device, 25 devices minimum. For all commercial landscape or all commercial rebates in general, a reservation is required before purchase. So you would need to go, or your customer would need to go to SoCalWaterSmart.com, reserve the funds. Once you get the reservation, you have 60 days to purchase, install, and go back online to complete your application and upload the documentation that you need. Okay. Now I'm going to go into the turf removal rebate. Here is a picture of a before, all the grass, and then the after with mulch, some rocks, and plants. So we are in partnership with MWD, which is Metropolitan Water District, which is our wholesaler of water. And if you heard the news today, you heard MWD a lot. So the partnership is the total, they pay for a portion of the rebate, we pay for the other portion. It totals $3 per square foot of grass that is removed and converted to drought tolerant landscape. It is very important that before you go out there and remove the grass, that the project is pre-approved. So $3 per square foot, $3 per square foot of grass, 5,000 square feet maximum. Now, if you do a front yard this year and you get a rebate, or the customer gets a rebate, they can apply for another rebate the following year for, let's say, the backyard. So it's something that, everything can be costly, especially at these times, that may be taking advantage of the rebate for the front yard at this time, is better than, and then later taking advantage of the rebate for the other areas. Commercial, this is, this I believe was the Kaiser Hospital. Actually, a lot of the Kaiser hospitals, they did a lot of landscaping retrofits. And once again, here's the grass and the before and after. And for commercial, it also has to get pre-approved. The square footage, the dollar is actually $3 per square foot, maximum 50,000, and anything over 50,000 is $1 per square foot, up to 7 acres. We've had big projects. 7 acres is an odd number, and I don't know why they selected 7 acres, but it's still a pretty big area. And the same thing you would be able to do in phases, I guess. All right, the terms and conditions for the turf removal. In order for your project to be approved, the following must be met. All turf must be removed in the area and covered with a weed barrier material, preferably organic. Cardboard, paper would be organic. We don't recommend it, but there is material that sometimes people use that is sold for the purposes of weed barrier material. But a lot of times that doesn't decompose, and it actually causes more problems with your plants and weeds. So definitely cardboard and paper would be your better choice. All overhead irrigation must be capped, removed, or converted to drip. Claire made that pretty clear. Though we do have rebates for the nozzles, that would not qualify for the turf removal program. Once again, all irrigation, overhead irrigation must be capped, removed, or converted to drip. Additional hand watering will be needed during plant establishment. All weed barrier material and exposed soil must be covered with at least 3 inches of mulch. You can do 4 inches. You can do 5 inches. I don't want to see any exposed soil. If I see exposed soil, then it makes me question if you actually have a weed barrier material. I mean, there's, you know, you don't want us to go out there and inspect it because then now we're going to measure it and all that stuff. So I don't want to see soil. Make sure you put at least 3 inches of mulch. The project must include one of the following rain capture features: rain garden, rain barrel, cistern, infiltration trench, vegetated swale, berm, dry riverbed, grade or retention pond. There's actually videos when you apply on the webpage I will give you that show you the different styles. I personally don't have the knowledge of being able to tell you exactly the difference between a vegetated swale or a berm or anything like that. But I think Claire, you know, indicated about the rain gardens. So there's a lot of different techniques that you can use. So this next one is really, really important because the majority of the problems that we get, this is the terms and conditions that they get wrong. So the projects are allowed a maximum of 25% of project area to be covered with non-vegetated material, such as pavers, gravel, decomposed granite, decorative rocks, sand, etc. So what this pretty much means is that of your whole project area, 75% of it needs to be plants and mulch. 25% of it can be some type of hardscape, whether it's gravel, whether it's decomposed granite. So if you're doing a rain garden, those rocks are going to count as your hardscape. So back about 5 years ago, we used to allow 100% hardscape, which was, you saw a lot of those projects that were all gravel. And environmentalists went to the mayor, went to our board, and explained to them the global factors, the global impacts that it was having, and the heat island effect. So they agreed to reduce the amount of hardscape allowed, which is also the reason they don't allow synthetic turf, because of the same reason. So again, once again, no more than 25% of the project area can be pavers, gravel, decomposed granite, etc. Front yard and backyard projects must include 3 plants per every 100 square feet. You have 1,000 square feet project, 3 plants per every 100, that's going to be 30 plants. We recommend native and drought tolerant plants and California friendly plants. Now I know I'm giving you a lot of information, but I know you have a lot of questions too, and I will answer all of them. So the City of LA Parkway terms and conditions. So the parkway is defined as the area of the street between the back of the curb and the sidewalk that is typically planted or landscaped. So technically, though you might think that this is your property, it's not. It's the City of LA, and they don't want you to do anything to it, but have grass on it. But if you do decide to do the turf removal program, they will allow plants and mulch only. Plants and mulch only. The reason I repeat that is because a lot of the parkways that come through, people put in a walkway, put in pavers, put in gravel. That is not allowed. Plants and mulch only. If you wanted to do that, you would have to pull 2 permits through street services, and I believe it costs over $2,000. So just make it simple, plants and mulch only. The plants must be drought tolerant and must cover 80% plant coverage at full maturity. So we definitely recommend low growing ground cover type plants. Plants must also be lower than 36 inches in height at full maturity. So the only difference in the terms and conditions for residential and commercial is the parkway. All commercial properties must obtain a permit from street services. Okay, and if you have any questions, let me know, but we also have the terms and conditions for the parkway at this website here. So what is not allowed in the parkway? Turf or turf-looking grasses, plants with spines or thorns, poisonous, noxious, or invasive, vegetable or fruit gardens. These are not allowed. And the main thing is any type of hardscape, gravel, cement, decomposed granite, synthetic or artificial turf. These are not allowed. And unfortunately, you can't have a portion of it compliant and the other half not compliant. We would not be able to pay you for the full parkway. So just make sure that you understand that if you're applying for a parkway. All right, applying for the turf removal program. Once again, pre-approval is required before starting your project. As much as you might want to go out there and just tear out that grass, you need to do a few things before that. A minimum of 5 pictures of the proposed project area showing the front of the house and front yard will need to be uploaded, along with the first page of your LADWP bill or the customer's bill, and then a landscape plan, a drawing. Nothing fancy. I mean, if you have, these great looking plans, it's great. In reality, they just want to know that you have an idea and not just, going to be letting this 880 days go by and you don't do anything because you didn't really have a plan. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can just get graph paper and draw it and put some measurements on there and where your plants are going to be. So that's pretty simple. This is where you go to apply at SoCalWaterSmart.com. You will need to register your email and create a password. You'll go to residential or commercial rebates, and then you'll apply for the, you'll submit your application. This is also the place where you're going to go to apply for your rebates as well, whether it's residential or commercial. All of our rebates go through SoCalWaterSmart.com. Okay, so that's definitely a website that you want to have as one of your favorites. Once you go in there, you'll enter basic application information: name, address, email, phone number, account number. You're going to enter your project information: project address, property type, lot size, irrigation type, square footage of the front yard, backyard, parkway. And then you're going to select your rain capture technique that you will use in your project. When you get to this point, you're going to make sure you read the terms and conditions. This is where you're going to find the videos that have the different types of rain capture techniques. Whoops. And then you're going to sign it by typing in your name and then hitting save and submit. Now, once you hit save and submit, you're going to automatically get a notification that your application has been submitted. You will be assigned an application number. It might start with a TRM or an LTP. I don't remember which one it is at this point anymore. But just know that it will come from EGIA or SoCal WaterSmart. And it's just going to indicate that they have received your application, that it will be reviewed and takes 1 to 2 weeks. This is not your pre-approval. Do not go and tearing out your grass at this point yet. Okay, wait until you get your pre-approval email, which looks like this. On the left-hand side, it says turf reservation application has been approved. So you're going to have all the terms and conditions listed on there. It's going to say your date, your 180 days, when you have to finish your project by. That's 180 days, that's 6 months, that's a long time. You can finish it all up in 1 month, but you know that you have 6 months to do it. Once again, read the terms and conditions. If you have any questions, email me or my group. You could call us. We are currently telecommuting, so if you do call us, make sure you leave a voicemail. Do not talk really fast, and leave us your phone number and we will call you back. Once you have read the terms and conditions and you know that what you're going to do, then you can go ahead and start. When you are finished, before the 180 days, you're going to go back to SoCal WaterSmart, sign in, update your application information, upload a new first page of your most current bill, upload at least minimum of 5 new pictures of your completed project, making sure that you include a picture of your rain capture feature. And then you're going to make sure you save and submit. And once again, SoCal WaterSmart will be reviewing your project. It takes about 1 to 2 weeks for them to review it. Then they send it to our queue in my group. And usually we get it back within a week or so. If you do get an email from us, usually it means that something went wrong. And I'm sorry, I'm warning you ahead of time. It's going to be an email that says your project might be denied or has been reduced to 0 because of, and then it'll tell you the specific reason. Maybe you put more than 25% hardscape, which is one of the main things that we see. What we want to do is get your attention for you to call us back, and normally that does it. So when you call us, we're going to try to work with you on correcting what is wrong to make sure the terms and conditions are met. So please don't be too mad, but we do want to work with you. Once we approve your rebate, it's going to take about 6 to 8 weeks for you to get the check. All right, so here's the contact information for my water conservation group. There's our email, there's our hotline. There is also the information for SoCal Water Smart. That's where I said you're going to apply for all your devices and for the turf rebates. If you have any problems when you're entering your application, any technical problems, I can't help you. You do have to call SoCal Water Smart, and that is their phone number. And that's pretty much it. There's my information again. I am open for questions.
Thank you, Martha. Also, if you guys have any questions about the lecture, we can my lecture, we can ask those too. But yeah.
Can you back up one screen with the other context there?
Sure, no problem.
Thanks.
Martha, I got a question. I
Yes.
feel like I ask all the same ones, but I feel like they're questions that I know come up when you're actually doing it.
Correct.
And so on the, like, after you've been approved and you have to, sorry, yes, you've been approved and you've finished your garden. And it says you mentioned that you have to submit a second bill, like LADWP bill. Does it have to show that there's water savings? Because
No, because at that time, actually, there won't be water savings.
right.
Though it is a water saving program, the water savings won't come until those plants are somewhat established. At the very beginning, you're going to be, having to hand water because the plants are going to need more water than what you can apply. So that is not something that we look at that moment.
Cool.
Good question.
Yeah, no, I wanted to clarify because that's basically what we teach in the class, but I just want people to know that you guys know that too.
Yes.
So also another question, if you guys are feeling too shy, but I know comes up, which is, do I have to have living turf grass or like living bright green turf to apply for the program?
So that is also a good question that often comes up. So this is a water saving program, like I mentioned. If you have dirt, you are saving a lot of water. And so we're not going to approve a project for you. However, if you have grass and it's green and lush, we know you're going to save a lot of water. So most likely you will be pre-approved. If you have yellow dying grass, there's signs that there was life, and maybe you just stopped watering a few months ago and it's not dirt, it's actually dead grass, you would get approved.
Hi, Martha. I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One being that for the hose bib irrigation controller, is there a way for a renter to apply for something like that?
Okay, you kind of broke up a little bit towards the end. I'm sorry.
Is there a way for a renter to apply for the hose bib irrigation controller or any of these, for example?
I think the terms and conditions say that it has to be the owner. For certain things, it doesn't have to be the owner. If you have the water bill or the electric bill is in your name, normally it will go through without a problem. For the bib one, I don't see why you would get denied for it. That's something that you can definitely even take with you if you were to move out.
And then secondly, when you say the project area, so 25% of the project area for the turf replacement can't be hardscape, or more than 25% can't be hardscape. What do you consider the project area? And I'm thinking specifically of, the common sort of like front yard in LA with a concrete path and landscape sides on each side. Is
Right.
that existing concrete a portion of that 25% or?
No. So
Okay.
if we're looking at a front yard and let me see here. So on the side over here, by the car, by the driveway, even if there was a pathway right in the middle, I would assume that you wouldn't just measure the whole thing and say, okay, it's 1,000 square feet. You might have to say, okay, it's 900 because the pathway is 100 square feet, But
Yeah.
pretty much if there's an existing, cement pathway, it's just, that's not included. That's not part of your 25%. On the picture to the right where it has the post part of it, that little dry riverbed there, that's the hardscape. If they have the big rocks, So there's a big difference here in, there's a small amount of hardscape here. But if you can imagine about 5 years ago, if you've been around, there was a big company that came in that pretty much dumped gravel on people's front yards.
Yeah.
So that's what they're trying to avoid. So
That makes
that's
sense,
why
yeah.
it's mulch and plants.
Thank
And you don't have to have hardscape. The other thing you want to remember is decomposed granite. It is permeable. However, it's considered a hardscape. If you create a pathway and if you compact it really well, it's not as permeable as you think, but that is also limited to 25%.
Thanks.
Also, Devin, when you apply for the thing or the turf replacement, you are the one that identifies the project area. You kind of give the measurements. So you, even in this example that she has, if the person was like, oh, I only want to do half my yard, you would only give the square footage for half your yard, sorry. So like you actually give the measurements to them. So you would exclude anything that you didn't want to include, and it doesn't have to be the whole yard.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's nice.
Yeah, and we've had projects where they want a portion of the grass because they have a dog or they have kids. I don't know that kids really play in the front yard anymore, but I can see where if your dog or something. So they have done, let's say, the front part of it, or they did a circle of grass, and it's like no problem. We're just going to deduct that. As far as inspections, I don't know. I know sometimes people ask, do we actually go and inspect this? We do. Even during, right now, the pandemic and stuff, we have Google satellite images. There's a lot of that is easy to measure on, via satellite images. If it's really necessary, if there's a big discrepancy or something with your numbers and our numbers, then a physical inspection will be done, and we'll measure it. And we're looking at your pre-pictures, and it's what we're basing it on. So it's only if we have, like I said, a big discrepancy that we would physically go out there and measure it. Any other questions?
Hello. Hi. I have a question on the turf removal. Does this include artificial turf?
So artificial turf is no longer allowed. About 5 years ago it was, but it's
Oh, no,
no
no.
longer allowed.
I mean, like, does that count, like, to be removed? Because my parents have artificial turf, and I'm trying to, like, get that away.
I see what you're saying. So they would not be able to qualify because it has to be actual water using grass. Now, a lot of people, hose down artificial turf, but that would not qualify. So
Do you know, is there, there's no rebate that, like, would help that out, like, to remove that artificial turf?
No, because technically artificial turf is something that's not supposed to be watered. And like I said, this is definitely a water saving program,
right.
so it would not be beneficial to us.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Martha, I have a question.
Yes, David.
If you, well, I actually turned off my water about a year ago, so it's kind of brown, and I've been trying to eradicate the grass that was in there. But so I don't know if, one, can I go ahead and still apply for it? And then two, if I wanted to switch to like a buffalo grass or a native grass species, like maybe Carex panza, or can that be done as well then?
So as far as your question about you turned off your water about a year ago.
Yeah.
If you had grass before and you were watering it, and sometimes exceptions have been made as far as MWD will approve it, and based on maybe a Google Street View picture where we can see, or if you have pictures from the past.
Yeah.
Where you had green grass.
Yep.
Usually an exception can be made.
Okay.
So that's that. As far as grasses, native grasses, I think it says something about, and I don't have all the terms and conditions here, but I think somewhere at SoCal Water Smart, it might say something about you cannot have grass looking plants. So, I mean, if you put some plants here and there, some type of grasses, it's fine. I mean, but if you completely remove your grass and then put buffalo grass or whatever grass, I don't think they're going to accept it. I think some of those you can even mow, and what they don't want is people see that it's kind of a grass and they tend to go back to watering it like it's grass. So they don't want that. And but there is a lot of native grasses that you can use, I think, you know, just not as a whole project. And also, I mean, it does have to have drip system. So, but if you have a particular one that you want me to look into, I can definitely do that if you want to email me.
Mhm. Yeah, I have drip in it too,
Okay,
underground drip. Okay. All right, thank you.
no problem. Thank you.
There is a question in the chat that asked, how do you become a water conservation specialist, Martha?
Well, I actually started with the department over 21 years ago, and I came in as a customer service rep, which was the call center. So once you get in there, then it's just a matter of being there and having a degree, and not necessarily in water conservation or anything like that, but there's a lot of different job opportunities once you're there. I happen to get into water conservation. I've been there for 11 years. So it's something that I like. I'm not a horticulturist. I'm not a landscaper. I actually kill plastic plants, but it's something that I like. And, especially during these times where the water is a big issue, or the shortage of lack of.
Right. Yeah, very impactful work in the current times, for sure. Any other questions, you guys, for Martha?
I'll throw a question out there.
Okay.
And I came late from the break, but I wanted to know about plant spacing or maybe plant density, and I apologize if you already kind of answered that, but I think, yeah, in terms of like, how do you determine how much spacing to allow for different species, different
So,
types?
So as far as the turf removal program, we don't have a requirement as far as spacing goes. I mean, you need to, research your plants you're putting and what spacing they require, and make sure that they have enough spacing. But the only requirement that we have as far as plants is that that there is 3 plants for every 100 square feet of grass that you remove. So whether you put them, in a circle, or whether you line them up in rows, I mean, that's definitely going to be up to you or your design. The only place where we do question, or not that we question, that we ask for, is the parkway area has to have 80% plant coverage at maturity. So a lot of the plants that go there have to be low growing. Definitely ground cover plants are what's recommended, native plants. So something like Diamondia, might need to be, I don't know, 8 to 12 inches apart in order to cover the area, and there's other plants, the yarrows, they don't grow more than 3 feet tall. And there's a lot of plants, those you have to plant closer just because the area has to be covered 80%. If it's your front yard, your backyard, 3 plants for every 100 square feet, that's the only requirement.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions, guys? If not, we can wrap it up. And what's today? Tuesday. So Friday's lecture will be weeds and integrated pest management. So that will be Friday. And again, remember your homework is basically, using everything that Martha mentioned. Tell me, like one of your like a client that you have, what rebates do they qualify for? Why not? What would they benefit from? Spell it out for me what you heard from Martha's presentation. And otherwise, that's it. Have a the rest of the Tuesday, and we'll see you on Friday. Thank you so much, Martha, for coming and sharing as always.
No problem. You guys have my contact information, so please feel free to email me and I will answer, or somebody from my group. And if you want me to answer, just put, Martha on there and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay. Good night, guys.